Hey, how are you? I'm so excited to be back again, and we've had a break over the holidays and beyond, and just wanted to kind of get started with our series again. And the Facebook Lives are back, and I'm on my page helping kids with reading, and this series is going to be called Train Your Brain series. And so we're going to get going with that. Hi, Laura. I'm glad you're here. And so the new schedule is Tuesdays at 10 Central Time in the morning, and then on Thursdays at noon. I thought I'd try some different timings for some of you that, it might be better for you as well. So to catch me live. So I'm Jean Harville, and I'm the founder of Raising Kids Who Love to Read, and I'm the creator of Rethink Reading Academy. And so, I have notes down here because I'm so passionate about what I'm talking about that sometimes I go off on a tangent, and I want to kind of keep myself honed in a little bit. So we're gonna have a series of twice a week for a couple weeks, and then we'll be going daily for a few more weeks after that. So I have a lot to unpack and a lot of things to talk to you about that I think it's going to be super, super helpful to you as parents to really fully understand what's going on with yourselves as well as your kids, and how we can help ourselves as parents and also help our kids, right? Because that's what we're here for. And so, many of you have come into the group, the Raising Kids Who Love to Read group, and the main thing, there are some other issues, but one of the main things that most of you are wanting is how to motivate your kid to read. Motivate your kid to read. All right, so there's several things to unpack with that, and I kind of alluded to some of them in December in the Rethink Your Reading Academy, and so our group, and so we're going to kind of start with that again and talk a little bit more about it. So Train Your Brain series. So how does training the brain and reading come together, right? You're like, well, wait a minute, that seems like two different things, right? Well, actually, it's not, because the brain is what the control is, and that's what when we're learning reading skills, we are creating new neural pathways in the brain, because every time we learn something, we change the brain. The brain is neuroplastic and has neuroplasticity. It changes all the time. Every time we learn something new, we change our brain, which is awesome, because we're not dealing with a set brain. We are dealing with a brain that changes and molds, and we can make those changes in what we're learning and how we learn something, and also in the way we think and what we believe, which is awesome. And this is research that has come about in the last 30 years since we started with the functional MRIs and being able to look at the brain and what learning does to the brain. So this is good news. This is really good news. So like I said, with those advancements, we can see what's going on in the brain. Now, many of the thoughts that we have, or the beliefs that we have about ourselves, were created back in our childhood. Okay? So things that maybe that are the way you think, the way you say, I think that differently, or that's a different way that's a different viewpoint that I have, because they all are based on our historical situations or experiences that we had. And many of the ways that we think about ourselves and the way our kids think about themselves. But first, I'm going to start with us as parents, okay? Because it says that transformed people transform people. Now, transform meaning in changes, the things that we can do, can change the way we think and believe. And the same thing is that, as parents, we can transform our kids. So first we need to work on ourselves so that we can fully understand, what does this mean? And you guess what? It is not your fault. You're not broken. This is really a really good thing. There's no negativity here. This is just you, taking a look and exploring, where are your thoughts coming from? Why do I think this way and my friend thinks that way? And neither one of you are wrong, because it's based on your experience when you were younger. Now, with talking about brain development, the prefrontal cortex does not fully develop until you're about age 25-ish or so, and And that is where you think, you process, in anything that has to do with analytical, all that kind of stuff. That, exactly, Laura, exactly. Transforming ourselves before we can transform our kids, because we have to understand what that means and what that process is. Then we can recognize it in our children. If we don't go through this ourselves, we don't recognize that in our children. So, the prefrontal cortex is not developed, is not close and fully working or operating until we're in our 25s, our 20s or so. And so things that affect us from birth to age 7, even school, anything that affects us to help to make us feel, or we develop that feeling of not good enough. I'm not a good reader. I can't keep up with the rest of the classmates. They're making fun of me. Well, I could have done better, or what's wrong with me? Okay, why are these people saying these things? And the way I'm accepting that into my subconscious brain, wiring it into my brain, it means that I'm not enough. I'm not safe. I'm not loved. And those are the 3 core basic values that we as humans, everything that we hear or think, can boil itself down to not feeling safe, not feeling loved, and not feeling enough. And those are 3 basic values that we as humans hang on to. Okay, so one of the things that I have my notes, but I'm not really going by my notes, so I may be confusing myself. But anyway, what I'm doing is I want to just kind of go back and give you an example, for instance. Okay, and I know myself the best, so my examples will be coming from me. But maybe you can relate with this. And I remember that this was junior high, and junior high is really a tough time. Well, they called it junior high, now it's called middle school. And that's a really tough time for development. That's when a lot of body development goes on, a lot of brain development goes on, and we are just open to things coming in, negativity coming in and creating, because we know that a thought plus an emotion paired with an emotion will create a belief over time, over and over and over again, and this becomes hardwired into your brain. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So, being the new girl in school, and this was I think it was 7th grade. This was at that time when I was in junior high. It was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade at that time. And so I was a new girl coming in. I believe I was 8th grade when I was coming in. So already the kids in that school had all moved up from the elementary into that area, or have created their groups and their niches and their bonds, right? At that point, I was a new girl coming in. I didn't know anybody, and I was very quiet because things that had happened in my past caused me to be quiet, introverted, and not boisterous, because I didn't want to put myself out there for different reasons. I would like playing small, right? So I go to my locker, I'd go to class, and there was this group of girls. There's always bullies at that age, because they themselves are trying to find out who they are. They're trying to find out if they're a leader or if they're a follower. And if they don't follow the leader, then they're going to get bullied or shunned, so they better follow the leader. You know how that kind of works, right? These bully groups. So being the new person, I didn't know the dynamics of anyone that's in the classes, but I got picked on for sure, and not just verbally, but also physically as well. And stepping on my heels, stepping on my toes. And this one incident that just sticks out in my mind was that we had gone in, and being the new person, I wanted to be accepted, of course, And so being in a class, I think it was like a social studies or geography class or something like that, and the girls that bullied me were sitting around, in my area. I mean, we didn't have a choice of where we could sit. And they passed a piece of paper, and they wrote their names on a piece of paper. And they said, "Here, Jean, sign this, be a part of our group." I'm like, okay, cool. I get to be a part of their group. I signed my name on the paper. And then later on, after the end of class, I was packing up my books and everything. They all had left, and I packed my books up. And I looked down, and there's that piece of paper with only my name on it. The rest of their names had been erased off with an ugly picture of the teacher drawn on it, tossed down to the floor. I'm like, oh my goodness. you know. And so I picked it up real quick. So I'm like, I didn't want the teacher to see that I drew an ugly picture of her, right? And so that just cut me to the core. I was so devastated. That was so mean and just nasty. And so I picked that up and I wadded that up and I threw it in the trash can, you know, with the trash can out in the hallway. I threw it in there. I was just so, that really affected me. And that caused me to not feel, and to not feel good enough. I wasn't going to feel good enough to have friends. You know, this happened and it just took a lot. And one thing after another, that whole year was just, you know, compounded, notes stuck in my locker, you know, all that stuff. And so the thing is, that same group of girls turned on my best friend, the next year, the following year, right? And so she understood what was going on. And the funny thing is that now that I look back, this is a time period that a lot of kids are trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to bring themselves up higher than everybody else, squashing other people down. And it's just an identity thing, like, who am I? They're trying to understand who they are, right? And I think it happens more than we think. Therefore, as parents, this is something we want to really be aware of what's going on in schools. You know, if your kids are in school, then you really want to be aware that of their emotions and things, and your kids are going to stuff it. They're not going to talk to you about it at all. But you could see these changes in the way they think and what they believe and how they feel. If they start feeling not enough and not putting themselves out there, if they start feeling unloved or not loved, or if they start feeling not safe, then you wonder, like, okay, where's that coming from? What is going on? Maybe have a conversation with your kids. And they may deny it. I mean, I never talked to my parents about it. I would lay awake at night just upset, wake up in the morning like, oh my gosh, I have to go to school. Just dreaded the whole thing. I never said a word to my parents. Never said it. I carried that and stuffed it the whole time. And it took me years and years to overcome that. And it wasn't even until my adulthood, until just more, I say in the past 5 years, I have finally dealt with that. I'm sitting here talking to you on live, right? And I would not have done that before. So this transformation that I have been able to go through is what I want to talk to you about on this Train Your Brain series. And I'll be alluding to different pieces of it and talking about how we can actually rewire the brain for thinking, for like new skills, new learning skills for school, for our kids, as well as the way they think about themselves. Excuse me. And we can also create ourselves, look within ourselves. Why do we procrastinate? Why are we overwhelmed? Why do we go through perfectionism? Because it keeps us from having to do that hard thing that we know that's might make us feel not good enough, or not safe, or not loved. These are stories that we carry back into our own adulthood. If you think back, you know, today, just kind of think back into your childhood and what were some things that really stand out in your brain that you were talking about your sister-in-law. Yes, you can start realizing, and I know many of you are homeschool moms as well. And so it may apply or may not apply, but also could have things have happened at home as well that created a false belief or a limiting belief within your child or not. So this is, I know as a homeschool mom, you are protecting your kids a little bit more from these social interactions. However, I know with the homeschool community, you do have outlets where you can bring your kids into social situations as well. So it can happen even in those situations. And so for you to be aware of if there's a change in the way your child is acting or thinking, think back and wonder if something happened yesterday, and be able to create those conversations, right? Have those bonds with your kids, that relationships, where they feel that they're safe to come talk to you. Exactly. And they feel that they can. And so just opening up those conversations, notice some behaviors that are going on. Like if something would seem to be easy and all of a sudden it's hard, is it actually the skill that they are having difficulty with it, or is it an underlying belief that's going on as well? So you have to think about other things as well. And so think back into your own childhood on areas that cause you to not feel safe or loved or enough, right? And so I think when we recognize it in ourselves, then we can help our kids through this as well. Because the whole thing about just think happy thoughts is not going to work. It has to be, it may be a Band-Aid solution for that moment, but it's not going to recreate it's not going to unwire what's already been wired in the brain. All right. So we said when there is a thought that's been, and an emotion has been added with it, and that creates a belief, and when that happens over and over and over again, that's where the hard wiring comes in. And so in order to and so what happens is it hardwires into our subconscious brain. 90% of our decisions comes from the subconscious brain. This is automatic. They are automatically playing in our subconscious brain. And so we're not aware of it. We have no idea where that came from. Not really. And you take a look at your own, like, why am I procrastinating? That's trying to avoid, right? And why am I being perfectionistic? Why am I spinning my wheels on like getting something perfect when it really doesn't matter, right? And so am I trying to cover up my vulnerability that, like I'm not good enough? So you have to kind of look at those behaviors, those outward behaviors, and really ask yourself, what is behind this? What is the thinking that's going on? What's the belief that is running in my subconscious brain, right? So this is not your fault. This is not your kid's fault. But there are simple ways that we can use to change these thoughts, okay? So, the most important thing is it is not your fault. It is not your kid's fault. It's the way our brains are perceiving what is going on and how we attach the emotion to that thought and how that has become a belief over time. And so I'm going to, one of the things that we do on the processes is a way of pruning that neural network that we don't want and creating the synapses of the neural pathway that we do want. And it's like a highway within the brain that's run with the glucose, the neurotransmitters of glucose, that helps the synapses going in the brain. And it's so fascinating. They have such little videos about what's going on in the brain now that is just incredible. It's like electrical impulses going through the brain. And so when a pathway is traveled over time, multiple times, it becomes really hard and thick, and that's the pathway that goes through. So what we want to do is to rewire anything that we don't want, to break that highway or that pathway, break it, but also build another one in its place that's going to be the true belief, the good, the belief that we want, that's not going to hold us back. And that we build that along the way and create that neural pathway for that new thought and that new belief. So that's how we can make that change. So it's not just think happy thoughts. That is not what's going to be, or mindfulness, or, those things are all good to have, but it's not going to change your belief or your child's belief or behavior and outcome of as to why they act a certain way. So with reading, we've got a couple of things going here, right? We've got skills that yeah, for sure, we can fix the skills by just some simple ways of, like, this is how you break a word apart, this is how you figure out what's going on in the story, like comprehension, understanding, vocabulary. Those are all things, and we have tools that we can work on with that. And I'm going to be opening the Rethink Reading Academy in the next in a couple of weeks or several weeks. So look for that, and that's where we can work on the specific reading skills that your kids may be having. Right, the skills that are causing them trouble, that's keeping them from being able to actually do the reading, right? But there's also that other component. There's the emotional part of learning that has those beliefs that they have created in their brains that they can't do it. they're not going to pick up a book. What happens with when thought over and over again, and your child is supposed to be reading, and they go towards the book, their subconscious brain says, "Oh, no, don't worry about that. Remember, that's not something that you like. That causes you to not feel very good. So just don't worry about that. Just put that down. Go play what you like. Go on your devices and have time on your device, right? So of course you're going to get the dopamine hit on that computer or on that device that they are on, their PlayStation or whatever. That's a lot more, I would rather have dopamine hits of making me feel good, right, than picking up a book that doesn't make me feel good, because it's hardwired into my brain that was not fun, I was made fun of, and that's not feeling good. That's not really good. So there's two different things that are going on. The motivation to want to read, maybe they want to read, and maybe the skills are in the way. We have to figure out what the issue is and what's going on. The thing is, it's not your fault. It's not your kid's fault. And there are tools, there are simple tools that can be used to help change the way they think. Okay? So what I'm going to finish up here for today is that, as parents to deal with our own stories, be thinking back in your own life, in your early life, what are some things, and you probably haven't thought about them for years, but just go on a journey back to remember when the trip to grandma's house, or remember when my brother said this, or remember when my parents left me accidentally at a truck stop and they drove off and they forgot that I was not in the car. You hear crazy stories like that. How did that make you feel? Or just kind of remember back to different stories or things that happen in your life that may have caused you to play small, not feel good about yourself, or kind of wonder, if you're loved and safe. So those are things, just kind of think about them. And like I said, it's not your fault. It's not your kid's fault. And there are simple tools that we can use to rewire that thinking of the subconscious brain. So this Train Your Brain live series is all about, we're talking about the limiting beliefs that are created by that thought, that emotion, which creates that belief, and how that can affect, and it's put into the subconscious brain, and 90% of what we do and say comes from that subconscious brain. All right, so Tuesdays at 10 a.m., Thursdays at noon, and tune in. Join us in the Reading Kids Who Love to Read Facebook group, and there's a button at the top of this page. Say if you're not in the group yet, you can definitely click that button, learn more. I think is what it says, and I'll also put the link down below as well. So then. Anyway, I'll put that link down below for the group, and then I will, you can click to get on into the Raising Kids Who Love to Read. And inside the group, I'm going to be talking about some upcoming events that will be happening over the next month or so. So you'll want to be in there, and we carry these conversations also inside the group as well. So I hope to see you in there, and I will see you on Thursday. Okay, bye-bye.